The movie begins with Rachel standing in her bedroom, admiring her reflection in the mirror, her hands gently resting on her pregnant belly. But the peaceful moment shatters when she suddenly wakes up. It was just a dream. The house AI, Elena, takes over, preparing breakfast, opening curtains, and handling chores. Noticing Rachel's low serotonin, Elena suggests virtual nature therapy, but Rachel dismisses it, saying she's too busy. She wakes her husband, Alvy, to say goodbye before heading to work. On the train, Rachel notices a woman carrying a strange pod, sparking her curiosity. At work, Rachel introduces a new AI robot designed to manage client portfolios and act as an executive assistant. Her team grows anxious about job security, but another manager, Alice, reassures them with corporate buzzwords. Rachel meets with the HR and is offered a promotion. When asked about her personal life, she mentions Alvy is a botanist, making her the primary earner, and they're not planning children. The HR suggests reconsidering, praising her success and highlighting the company's subsidy for the womb center to offset artificial womb costs. Later, Rachel's robot schedules a nature pod session. She gets a rare call from the womb center offering an appointment, bypassing the years-long wait list. During lunch, the nature pod relaxes her with serene sea and forest scenes, sparking another dream about having a baby. Meanwhile, Alvy teaches her students about fresh fruit, which they find unappealing compared to machine-made food. After work, Rachel visits her AI therapist, Eliza, and learns about artificial wombs, which avoid health risks and promote shared responsibility. Knowing Alvy prefers natural pregnancy, she doesn't tell him about her appointment. Eliza assures her that pod babies develop normally. Rachel meets Alice at an oxygen bar, who urges her to discuss the womb center with Alvy. At home, Alvy talks about society losing its bond with nature, making Rachel hesitate. Later, Rachel visits the womb center alone. Visitors watch a video on balancing careers with motherhood and addressing low birth rates. Director Linda shows pods where babies grow and explains features like customizing music, meals, and home bases with 48-hour batteries. Linda emphasizes interacting with the pod for better development. After the tour, Linda discusses costs and asks for a deposit. That evening, Alvy notices an $8,700 charge and confronts Rachel. She admits to reserving a spot. Upset she decided alone, Alvy voices her frustration. Rachel apologizes and they reconcile with a hug. Later, Rachel and Alvy visit Alice and her husband, who proudly showcase their baby pod and its health benefits. When offered a chance to hold the pod, Alvy declines. On the way home, they argue. Alvy calls the pod unnatural, while Rachel insists it feels real to the baby. When Alvy asks for more time, Rachel reminds him they'll lose their spot if they wait. Seeking a compromise, Rachel asks Alvy to see Eliza, the AI therapist. She reluctantly agrees but dismisses Eliza as just a machine. After the session, he lies, claiming it went well. That night, their argument escalates during dinner. Exhausted, Rachel says she doesn't want the baby if it means constant fighting. Later, they reconcile and Alvy agrees to the pod baby, seeing how much it matters to her. The next day, they meet Linda to finalize the contract. Linda explains they need Rachel's eggs and Alvy's sperm for a boy, but Rachel opts to let the gender be natural. Watching the fertilization process, they feel unexpectedly underwhelmed when handed the fetus in a jar. At home, Rachel's parents call to congratulate them. Her father suggests Alvy sell his Shell Island property to cover baby costs, making him uncomfortable. Rachel quickly changes the subject. The pod remains in the lab as the fetus continues to grow. Rachel becomes obsessed with the tablet linked to the pod, constantly checking progress and choosing music. This distraction affects her work and home life. When Alvy tries to connect one evening, Rachel dismisses him, saying she needs space because she's pregnant. Hoping to involve Alvy, Rachel asks him to pick music or send messages to the baby, but he refuses. She visits the lab and learns the pod must stay sealed for 7 weeks in total darkness. A nurse explains it will open when they hear the baby's heartbeat. Watching another pod leave for delivery, Rachel sits beside her, trying to feel a connection. Rachel dreams of having a C-section, but instead of a baby, the doctor delivers a hard-boiled egg. Startled, she wakes and shares the dream with Eliza, who dismisses it as random. When Rachel insists, Eliza suggests it might symbolize her acceptance of the artificial womb. Weeks later, Rachel and Alvy return to the lab to hear their baby's heartbeat. A nurse uncovers the pod, revealing the tiny fetus. They leave it at the lab for safety. Rachel prepares the baby's room, rejecting Alvy's idea of a real plant in favor of a hologram. Frustrated, Alvy storms off, planning to plant it on his island. Rachel pushes him to sell the island, leaving Alvy frustrated. At a pool, Rachel feels a pregnant woman's belly and learns the woman wanted an external pod but wasn't chosen, leaving Rachel conflicted. That evening, Rachel brings the pod home without consulting Alvy, explaining it needs more attention. They set it up in the bedroom, but Rachel shoos their curious cat away. When they try to be intimate, Alvy feels uncomfortable with the pod nearby and moves it to the nursery, nearly tripping. Later, they hear a noise from the pod. Alvy accuses Rachel of neglecting to feed the baby, but she reminds him he also has access to the app and needs to share responsibility. Rachel and Alvy visit a private school linked to Rachel's company which subsidizes tuition, where Alvy notices robots handle most activities. When a parent asks about accreditation, Linda explains schools now rely on companies due to the end of government funding. A father mentions a pod baby unable to dream, and Linda confirms it as a side effect of artificial wombs, but dismisses it as non-essential. One afternoon, Rachel ignores an office robot's warning about her declining productivity. Meanwhile, Alvy feeds the pod after an alert, feeling satisfaction. Moved by the baby's growth, he talks to it until Alina interrupts with a trivial question. Determined to bond, Alvy straps on a pod carrier and begins reading, cooking, and gardening with the pod, even taking it to the park and greenhouse. Later, his boss informs him the greenhouse will be replaced with holograms to cut costs, infuriating him. That night, Alvy cries while watching a penguin documentary, leaving Rachel concerned about his attachment to the pod. Alvy insists he's fine and refuses to send it back to the lab. The next day, Rachel notices dirt from Alvy's plants on the pod. At a dinner party, Rachel confides in Alice about her worries that Alvy isn't properly caring for the pod. Alice reassures her, saying Alvy is just excited about fatherhood, and notices he's one of the few men who wear the pod in front. Another pregnant friend shares her experiences, making Alice envious. The next morning, Rachel wakes up panicked, unable to find the pod. Seeing herself pregnant in the mirror, she joyfully tries to show Alvy but wakes up again. It was another dream. This leaves Rachel feeling uneasy about the pod. Days later, Alvy receives books on attachment therapy from his mom, emphasizing bonding with babies to build empathy. Rachel argues pods promote detachment, but Alvy suggests blending ideas might work. Rachel admits feeling disconnected and convinces Alvy to join her for a session with Eliza. During therapy, she shares that the pod dominates their lives, leaving no balance. Alvy corrects her, insisting they call it a baby. Rachel reveals Alvy has bonded with it, but she hasn't, making her doubt motherhood readiness. When Alvy blames hormones, Eliza suggests involving the pod in therapy sessions, saying it's a way to start bonding as a family. In the following days, Rachel starts carrying the pod but feels judged in public. At work, she accidentally bumps the pod against a door. After a meeting, Alice advises her to leave the pod at home, warning her that it could label her as a distracted mom. Alice places the pod in a cupboard where other parents store theirs. One evening, Rachel arrives late to a womb center workshop. Linda leads the group in sharing experiences and informs them the pods must return to the lab for the final development stage. Without the pod, Rachel and Alvy feel its absence. At the beach, Rachel dreams of wrapping herself and the baby in a blanket, only to wake up again. Rachel's HR director later warns her about declining productivity, but she denies feeling depressed. When Linda tells them pod babies are delivered at 10 months, Rachel wants the pod home for the final days, but Linda refuses, citing policy. Afterward, they encounter protesters against pod births. Impulsively, Alvy sneaks their pod out of the lab. That night, Rachel dreams of selecting a baby from a supermarket and wakes Alvy, suggesting they have the baby on their island. Alvy agrees, and they leave with the pod and their cat, ignoring Linda's warnings against home births. On the island, Rachel begins appreciating real nature during peaceful forest walks. One evening, Rachel discovers the pod base isn't working. Remote access from the womb center has been cut off. Panicking, she suggests returning it, but Alvy reminds her it has 48 hours of battery life and accuses the company of blackmail. The next morning, the pod plays a melody, signaling the baby is ready. Rachel struggles to unlock it with the app, but none of the codes work. Determined, Alvy breaks the pod open piece by piece. Finally, they welcome their baby with tears of joy and relief. Later, Rachel mails the pod parts back to the company and returns home to rest with Alvy and their newborn, embracing their new life together.